This next demo is one of my favorites. It's a really cool one, and it's something that a lot of people don't realize that you could even do in Excel. And it's all about building charts that can dynamically scroll and zoom. To do that, we're going to use the offset function, but instead of combining it with count day like we've done in the past, this time we're going to insert something called form controls, which will allow users to actually click and drag and manipulate scroll bars in the workbook to dynamically change the view that they're seeing within the chart. So it's a really cool combination of tools to create a really interesting effect. So in the Scroll and Zoom Charts tab, first things first, make sure that you have the Developer tab in your ribbon. If not, it's super easy to add. Just head to the File option, go into Options at the bottom, Customize Ribbon, and here on the right side of the pane, you should see a checkbox next to the Developer line. If that's unchecked, go ahead and give it a check and press OK, and you should see it pop up right there. And now the Developer tab is where you can go to edit Visual Basic or VBA code, to write or edit macros, and it also includes the form controls that we're going to be using for this particular demo. So in the Insert option here, go ahead and select the Scroll Bar Form Control, and these are really cool. You can actually drag them out into the exact shape that you want, so something like this will work great. And with it still selected, I'm going to hit Control-C, select an empty cell, Control-V to paste it, and now I have two scroll bars, one to define scroll and one to define zoom. Now to actually customize these and make sure that they're doing what we need them to do, you can right-click and go into your Format Control options. So in this case, we're looking at the scroll bar, which defines the window of data that a user is looking at, either shifted up or down within this array here. So the minimum value here will be 0 and the maximum value will be 11, because if they're starting at January as a default, scrolling 11 months down will get you right to the bottom of this array in row 14. I don't need to change the incremental or page change options. What's important is this cell link here. So if I select the selector, I'm going to link this form control to cell D16. And when I press OK and deselect it, now as I manipulate this, you can see the value in cell D16 updating accordingly. And we can just confirm we've got a maximum of 11 and a minimum of 0 just like we set. So same deal with zoom, format control. In this case, zoom is defined by the number of rows a viewer is looking at any given time, and that number of rows can grow or shrink. But the bottom line is that you have to be looking at least one data point or at least one row of data. So we'll give it a minimum of 1 and a maximum of 12, which is the height of our raw data array here. And in this case, my cell link will be cell D17. And I'll press OK and confirm that my minimum is 1, my maximum is 12. So let's go ahead and just set these somewhere in the middle. And now I want to kick things off by inserting a chart just so that I can tweak and polish and finalize formatting before taking the steps to actually make it dynamic. So in this case, I'm going to Control-click columns B and C along with column E because I want to create a combo chart where impressions are my columns, click-through rate is my line. Feel free to use any combination of these three metrics or follow along with me, totally up to you. So in my Insert options, I'm going to go into Columns, More Column Charts, Combo, throw click-through rate as a line on my secondary axis. And now again, feel free to follow along with these formatting adjustments that I'm making or format it however you choose. You know, this really isn't the important part of the lecture. I'm just going to format the plot area, get rid of my fill and border, make some changes to my line series, make it solid dark green with a width of 2. I'll smooth it out and add a quick preset shadow with an 80% transparency. And then with my columns, let's give these a light green fill and adjust the gap width down. And finally, I'll just add a chart element with some secondary minor horizontal grid lines. So there you go. I'm happy with that formatting. Again, customize it as you see fit. Now it's time to actually make this thing dynamic, because right now it feeds from these traditional fixed data arrays, which we'll need to update to link to our scroll and zoom values. So to do that, I'm going to go into Formulas, define a name, And let's start with our x values. So we'll call this scroll x. And instead of this fixed cell reference here, we're going to type an offset function. My x values are my months. So my starting point is my first month, which lives in cell B3. And the number of rows that I want to shift that starting point is going to be a function of the scroll index, which lives in cell D16. Because remember, as a user shifts that scroll bar left and right, they're essentially moving the starting point of that data window that they're looking at up or down. The next piece is how many columns over I want to shift that starting point. I'm going to type 0 because I don't want to shift the starting point at all. My months always live in column B. The second to last piece, remember, is the height, which in this case is defined by the zoom index, since users will be shifting that zoom bar and essentially growing or shrinking the window that they're looking at. Finally, width in terms of the number of columns is again just 1. So I can close that parenthesis, press OK, and our scroll x values are defined. Now I'm going to cruise through that same process for each of our y values, starting with scroll y or scrolly. And again, we'll just type offset here. Starting point for our first y values, which are impressions, lives in C3. I'm going to shift it down by the value in D16. Don't want to move any columns. The height is the zoom index in D17. The width is 1. Close the parenthesis, press OK. And one more time for scroll Y2. Offset, in this case, my first click-through rate value, cell E3. Number of rows I'm shifting is D16. Number of columns is 0. Height is D17. Width is 1. So same process, essentially repeated 3 times. Now the last step is to actually integrate those new named fields that we created into our chart. So I can right-click, select data, and in each of these series options, I'm going to click Edit. And rather than the fixed array from C3 through C14, this is my impressions column, which is my scroll Y column. So I can just type the name of that new named array right there, scroll Y, and press OK, and repeat the process for click-through rate, delete everything after the exclamation point, and just type scroll Y2, press OK. And now one really, really important note is that I need to edit my x-axis as well. So I'll go into Edit, delete everything after the exclamation point. This one's scroll X, press OK. But I'm not done yet. Even though it looks like there's just one value that needs to be adjusted for my x-axis, I need to change it twice. Once with impression selected, and again with click-through rate selected. It's a really, really easy thing to miss, but now as you can see, I've selected click-through rate. If I go back into my edit options, you see that fixed reference right there again. So I need to enter scroll X twice. And now the x-axis associated with click-through rate and the x-axis associated with impressions, which realistically is the same x-axis, is reflecting the new named array in all instances. So I can press OK. So let's see if that actually worked. We can try testing our scroll. Seems to work great. All the way on the left means we're starting at January. Right now we're looking at a 7-month window, which makes sense since we have a zoom index of 7. If we want to view additional months, I can scroll to the right. Now we're looking at the full window, or you can drill down to just 2 or 3 or 4 months at a time. And there you go. How cool is that? It's a really unique, really interactive chart that you can build with pretty simple form controls and named arrays in Excel. But there's one issue here that we need to address, which is that if we zoom all the way out, we actually have no guardrails in place to keep this array within the bounds of our original source data. So as you can see, I'm scrolling right past all of the data into an array that just no longer makes any sense. And nothing's incorrect about this. It's still plotting the right data. We just need to find a way to, again, put some guardrails in place to prevent this from happening. So if you play with this a bit, you'll notice that any combination of scroll and zoom index values that are equal to or less than 12 produce a valid view. So in other words, if I'm zoomed all the way out to 12 months, and my scroll index is set to 0, meaning I'm starting in January, this view is legit. But as soon as I try to scroll beyond December, now I'm in trouble. Same case if I zoom down to 8 months and scroll past a value of 4, you can see I'm into that danger zone once again. So all I need to do here is write a formula to define the maximum value that I want the scroll index to take. And so I can do that using a conditional if statement here. And I'll say if my zoom index plus my scroll index is less than or equal to 12, then just return whatever the scroll index would have been, because we know that if the combination of those indices is less than or equal to 12, then we have a valid view. So I can go ahead and just mirror the scroll index in that case. Otherwise, the value, if false, if the total is greater than 12, I can prevent the view from exceeding the bounds just by taking 12 minus the zoom index value. When I hit enter, you can see that anytime the total exceeds 12, my max scroll fixes its value. Anytime the total is under 12 or equal to 12, my max scroll mirrors the original scroll index. So to implement this change and make sure the change is reflected in our chart, I can go back to my Formulas tab, head into the Name Manager, and adjust those 3 named ranges that I created, starting with scroll X. I can press Edit. All I need to do here is change my reference to D16, which is my original scroll index, to D18, which is my max scroll. So I can just grab the 6, change it to an 18, and press OK. Do the same thing with scroll Y, change the 16 to an 18, and scroll Y2, 16 to an 18. And now if we scroll to the right to October, November, December, now as you can see it doesn't allow me to scroll any further. And so essentially what that means is that if I'm zoomed all the way out to the max view of 12, now the scroll bar is essentially useless because it's not allowing me to scroll outside of the realm or the bounds of my original array. So there you have it, using form controls and offset functions to create dynamic scrolling and zooming charts in Excel.